So welcome everybody to the GOAT District podcast. We got Chris Vaccaro of The Athletic and the Nffc Hall of Fame. And for back-to-back nights with the overhyped sleeper, Dan Williamson. How you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing great, guys. I'm glad to be back here in the district and ready to chop it up with you guys. The calendar is turned to August, and you know what that means. It's draft season. It's hot and heavy. It'll be here right before you know it, the season.
Well, let's get it going then, guys.
GOAT District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
So I have an NFFC board of a draft Chris and I was in, but first I wanted to talk to the overhyped sleeper. Dan, we drafted in the Pros versus Joes FFPC last night. Thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that team and also what you're going to be doing this Thursday night from the road should interest our listeners.
The Pros versus Joes last night, definitely a tough room. I mean, they always are. You're not walking into one of these things without walking into a group of 11 other really, really solid drafters. But what they are, if anybody's not familiar with it, basically the FFPC picks 42 pros, and then they pick 42 people basically at random from the people who enter FFPC main events before, I think it's June 1st or June 30th, one of those two. And they will get to compete against the pros. So there's 6 pros and 6 Joes in every league. And the Joes, of course, are not just average Joes. They are high stakes Joes. So most of the time you're running into a buzzsaw against everybody. And it's a fun league. It's a best ball, 20 rounds. No kickers or defense, so everybody's on top of their game. And ADP kind of goes out the window a little bit too, because everybody's pretty willing to just go get their guy. You see a little bit of flag planting, and you definitely see a lot of people who are more, just trying to build that team, whatever it takes. Which is kind of what we did too. We ignored ADP a little bit, but we also found some good values too.
Yeah, and we'll do a review show at some point in the near future going over the team that we built. It was a lot of fun. And I will say Dan is very, very good at this. If I'm going up against somebody in a best ball draft like this, I would not want it to be Dan. So I think the three of us together, it was a lot of fun. A couple years back, I was a Joe, and Dan was like the person I went to for advice on my build, and we planned it out. I ended up finishing like top 15. I happened to be in a league with Chris Birchby and Curtis Patrick, who put together monsters that year. But I think we could do really, really well with the team we built. So it was awesome to get a chance to draft with Dan. I have a couple more big drafts coming up with Dan that I'm looking forward to at the end of the month as well into September. But I want to get after it with Chris here. Chris is Mount Rushmore of GOAT District analysts at this point. This is about your 4th time on. So you're up there. You are an NFFC Hall of Famer. If anybody doesn't know Chris puts out a fantastic podcast on The Athletic with Nando DeFino. And will you have a third co-host this year, Chris?
Yeah, just like last year, Brandon Marianne Lee is joining the team again.
She's really good. She's really good too.
Yeah, she gives a nice, unique perspective. And the show's, it's a little different. You got Nando there. He's he's Nando if you know him. And Brandon will give you, her point of view from, a home league type of perspective, and I'll come in with, a high stakes perspective. So it's a show for everybody. It's not just, a show for one particular type of player. We have a little something for everything there.
And you also write a weekly column in The Athletic. Are you doing 2 this year, or is it you're going to do maybe talk about a little bit about that weekly column and anything else you're doing towards the end of the week?
Yeah, it's a weekly column. I put it out every Thursday morning throughout the season. Actually, I'll be starting midway through August. A bunch of draft prep articles I do every year, breaking down draft boards, ADP reports. Over at The Athletic from the high stakes perspective. I'll do that till early September. And then once the season gets going, I'll be doing my weekly, article. Comes out every Thursday morning. It's a preview of the upcoming week. It's a little look back at the, previous week, and, a little of everything in there.
It's definitely one of the articles I look forward to every week in fantasy football. And I think it's great because it shows things in a high stakes perspective, which we like having, as much of it in fantasy football as possible. Maybe talk a little bit about your draft process. When did you get started this year? Because I know you're deep in the high stakes streets. You're drafting multiple times a week. When did you start doing it? Did you use best ball this year?
I always get going with a couple best balls, guys. I get that started maybe mid to late June. I start my online championship season early July. I feel that that's good enough to get 2 full months of drafts in, drafting every night, every other night, straight through to the end of August when the mains come and all the big leagues. And that's usually my process. But, I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't know. It's a 12-month a year process, fantasy football nowadays, because if you're just waiting until the summer comes along, you're going to be behind the competition with all these big dogs that we go up against. So, you always got to keep your eye on everything and monitor everything that's going on in the league and in fantasy football.
Do you attempt to do projections?
No, I really don't. I don't sit down. I'm not one of those guys that sits down and with each player, breaks out what I think the numbers are going to look like. It's basically, I do it all, I guess, in my head. I'm a big ADP guy. Once I get my hands on some, leagues that have been going on, in the early fall, I start formulating a plan. I start putting guys in place that I think, and then I can go look at, each player that I'm like, this receiver and this receiver are both going off in the 4th round. Let me dig into these 2 guys so I know when I'm on the clock in these drafts who I want more than the other one. So I'll do that. It's basically like working backwards a little bit. I'm more of a board studier, though, to be honest. You guys know that. I've always said that I'm more of a board studier as the summer goes on. That's my biggest prep.
And yeah, I'm with you. I don't do projections. I like to look at certain stats, and I know Dan does as well. In terms of preparing for how we might value guys. Are there any stats that you put extra emphasis on from last season? Some guys like vacated targets, some guys like target share. Is there anything that you really, really put a lot of emphasis into?
Targets and available targets, from the prior year. I like to see what offenses have lost a lot of targets, just say like Baltimore, with, Hollywood Brown gone and a couple others. What available targets are now opening up in certain offenses? Those are 2 of the bigger ones that I like to look at. Pace of play, I like to look at that, but that varies year to year, with coaches. So a lot of people I feel get stuck with looking back at last year's stats and not realizing that so many things change. Coordinators change, players change, so many things. So you can't just look at one thing and say, oh my God, this team's going to run the ball like crazy. What a great offensive line they had. And, and now you look and it's okay. They lost 2 guys to injuries and 2 guys signed somewhere else. And now their offensive line went from, a top unit last year to, a middle of the pack projected, offensive line this year. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt, year to year. So yes, it's important to look back a little bit for certain stuff, but you don't want to get caught up just thinking that everything's going to be a continuation of the previous year in every offense.
And Dan, you do a lot with looking at coaching changes, and potential schemes. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you evaluate, new coaches and potentially new offenses and how you would prepare for that.
Yeah, so the main thing is when I'm looking at new coaches, I just want to try to get a sense of, are they one of those type of coaches that's just going to say, this is my system and I'm going to install it, and I hope the players can play it, and if they can't, I'm going to find players who can. Or there's also the coaches who say, I have a system, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of variability to it. There's a lot of ways we can massage it. I'm going to see what my players do well, and I'm going to use that. And I try to stick more with, drafting from teams with coaches who have the, that mindset of, hey, I can work with these players. I'm going to find the things they're good at. And I'm going to allow them to do what they do best. So that's a big part of it. And also part of it is just taking a look at what they've done in the past. What kind of players did they have when they did those things? And do they have that kind of a team now? Is it worth drawing? Is it worth looking back on or not? We got Brian Dable and for the New York Giants, and he was working with Josh Allen. Now he's working with Daniel Jones. Similar style players, maybe not similar talent level, but at least similar style of players. So, there are some things we can drag forward from that. And there are also some things where we say, well, Daniel Jones just probably isn't as talented as Josh Allen. And it's not just a function of he hasn't had the coaching that Josh Allen has. So, you use all those kind of things to kind of put things together and, and start formulating how you think the team's going to go.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. You don't want a coach to come over and have to throw his playbook out. Right. There's a ton of plays that he could call for Josh Allen in Buffalo, and he could take it to New York with him. He's got a mobile quarterback. Whereas if he had a quarterback that was a mobile, now he's got to rip up a lot of things that he used in Buffalo. So
right, yeah. If he had Matt Ryan running the team there, it would be a whole different story. And I wouldn't have any sort of confidence. I'd know what Dable was going to plan to do with Matt Ryan.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys ever? So we have Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, and I think the general buzz is everybody's really excited. I know I am. I know Dan and I have taken Justin Jefferson extremely high. I've been drafting him a lot. It's no secret that he's one of the favorite players of the GOAT district. Do you guys ever worry about a coach trying to implement a new scheme and maybe we've misinterpreted it and teams might be slower out the gate? And are there any kind of warning signs that you think we could see in the preseason where maybe we've got to pump the brakes on an offense like Minnesota?
I'll say this. Yes, I always worry about an offense getting off to a slow start when the quarterback is new and the coaching staff is new. It takes time. We see it so many times. More often than not, teams will get off to a slow start. Offenses when a new coaching regime comes in. With that said, I guess it's different. Do I have a veteran quarterback coming to learn a new system? Do I have a younger quarterback? How much talent does he have around him? I have to weigh all that into consideration here. So, there's a lot of moving parts. With O'Connell, the Wilk family, supposedly they wanted, a more up-tempo passing, coach to come in here. They want to open it up. They're tired of the grind out the clocks and the run the ball to death type of coach that Zimmer was. So, hey, listen, that's why we are all excited about this Minnesota offense. Now, can Kirk Cousins get it done? Is he the guy to get it done? We'll see. But he's going to sling it in Minnesota, and there's a reason why Jefferson is coming off the board as a top 3-4 pick.
Dan, do you have any? I know you're in Minnesota. Are everything you're hearing making you excited, or is there any kind of worry signs?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely exciting. As Chris said, though, anytime you get a new coach or a new quarterback coming in, there's always in the back of my head that things might start a little bit slow. I mean, even Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, the first half of the season for his first season there he was, I wouldn't call it struggling, but he certainly wasn't lighting it up either. And, so we might see a little bit of that from Cousins. But I have the confidence, that McConnell's got the scheme, and then we've got Cousins and Jefferson. We've got the players to run the scheme. So I think things are going to come together. And if the Vikings can do as well as they did under Zimmer last year with the passing game, I think they can do at least as well under O'Connell. So overall, I'm not worried, but I also wouldn't be panicking if Justin Jefferson has 2 touchdowns through the first 4 or 5 weeks. Things like that can happen, and that's just variance and just getting used to a new system.
And Chris,
I'm also, to add to that point. Okay.
Oh no, good. No, go for it.
Yeah, did you bring? I'm just in and out a little bit over here, but can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more if a player sits, gets injured early in camp and sits at, and is missing a lot of time throughout camp in a new coaching system with a new, new coaches, new quarterback. That's the biggest thing for me. Now, if he's there learning throughout camp on the field, getting the the reps in with his new quarterback, a receiver with his new quarterback, new coaching staff, everything like that. If he's not there and he's on the sideline, that is a red flag to me. That's something that makes me either take the guy off my board, moves him very far down. So, that goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about. But don't you guys feel that there's so many changes coming into this fantasy season with coaches? There was a lot of turnover with coaches or coordinators, new quarterbacks in new places. I feel like almost every team has got something new coming on. So if we were to back away from a lot of these offenses, there might not be anybody left to put on our draft board. It just seems so many teams went through a lot of changes in this particular offseason.
Well, I think in today's NFL, everything kind of moves faster. I think a lot of the narratives that we maybe had even 5 years ago are kind of out the window. We're not scared off by new wide receivers and new roles. Rookie wide receivers seem to be hitting at a higher rate. And we've seen some of these coaches come in and they just look like the smartest man in the room. Sean McVay is a great example. Sean McVay, he had talent in Los Angeles, obviously, but he was able to turn around at such a level where we kind of get excited more when there's change, I think, at this point. But obviously they're
Miami with McDaniel.
100%.
Let's see if he's the new genius that everybody's, got him chalked up to be. Let's see if Tua can adjust and make superstars. Listen, we got Hill and Waddle both coming off the board as top 36 picks. He's got to support a lot of, 2 big wide receivers in fantasy this year. Let's see if he's able to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Chris. And, that's because you not only have a new coach who we think and hope might be good, and we also have a quarterback who we still really feel like the jury's out on a little bit. You put those two together along with, like you say, 2 very, very highly regarded and highly drafted wide receivers. It really puts the pressure on. I mean,
I think they're one of the most interesting. I think they're one of the most interesting offenses for fantasy for us players to dissect. They are either going to make or break a lot of teams and turn, make or break successful seasons for some of us fantasy players this year, going in on Hill and Waddle, because those are 2 guys that I've seen opinions go all over the map on. And it's not like they have an automatic quarterback, getting them the ball. There's a lot of questions on Tua as well, like you said.
Yeah, it's those 2 guys are like league tilting type players. Because if Waddle continues his upward trajectory where he's getting drafted, then he's a massive value at ADP. If the offense takes a big step back and maybe he goes from a 102 catch guy down to an 85 catch guy, and the offense struggles to put touchdowns up on the board, he could be a guy where it's not so much that he would mess you up, but you're passing up on potential league winners in the range every year. So it's like the fourth round last year was Cooper Kupp. Fourth round in NFFC was Cooper Kupp. Fourth round in FFPC was Cooper Kupp. So it's like that range is producing these massive winners. So it's not so much only Waddle needing to produce, but you need him to really smash these days.
Right.
And Tyreek is a league tilting type guy. You see some of these teams with Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey, and then they follow up with in FFPC, where we not talking about NFFC at this point, but in traditional snake leagues, you see a lot of teams with one of the two perceived top backs with Tyreek Hill. That could be just, if Tyreek comes back and puts up Tyreek numbers, then he's a steal right there. Dan, what are your thoughts on? We talk a lot of Waddle. Are you warming to Tyreek in that range, Dan?
I'm having a hard time with Tyreek in that range, to be honest. I won't be shut out, but I'm not going way heavy on him either. And Waddle is another player. I don't have enough certainty about this offense to, go all in on either of those guys. Certainly want some exposure, but I will be underweight a little bit on Tyreek. I'll probably be even weight or a little overweight at best on Waddle.
Now, do you guys feel that Tyreek will trend towards the middle of the second as we get towards main event season, to creep up on that Debo, Debo, Mike Evans range? Will he go that way, or will he come take a step back into that Pittman Higgins range? Right now, he's kind of like in the middle. I've seen a lot of people pass on Tyreek for Pittman, Higgins, and a few others, but sometimes even AJ Brown. But it's, how do you guys see Tyreek trending towards the third round or trending towards the middle of the second round?
I think people want to draft Tyreek there, and they're looking for positive vibes. I think you'll see certain people that maybe we draft with that will be avoiding him, but I think the general consensus will be that people are looking for positivity in that Miami situation. I know, like, Tua connected with him on a 65-yard pass the other day in practice, and it looked great seeing Tyreek Hill find the end zone. So I'm of the opinion that unless there's kind of troublesome reports out of camp, or the offense just looks abysmal on a drive or two in preseason, I'm of the opinion that people are going to continue getting excited about Miami with Waddle and Tyreek. I'm kind of with Dan. I have not really gone with Tyreek. I've taken him maybe once or twice in like Football Guys type drafts. He's not my favorite player in that range. I just feel like you don't want to not, if you're drafting for volume, he's not a guy you should just avoid, because he has the ability to win weeks and potentially to win leagues. Yeah. But Waddle, I'm a little more bullish on because I just see him in that range where, as kind of like a mental test. Where would he go right now if there was no Tyreek? We would be taking Waddle so high. So I think we really believe in the talent. He's a high draft capital guy. And I think there's a scenario where he's more predictable week by week than Tyreek. Like, I just think that Waddle is going to be a guy that, we've seen him be able to win at different levels of the field. McDaniel screamed his name at the press conference, and potentially Tyreek opens it up and Waddle's the beneficiary, and he's cheaper by 2 rounds. We've seen a lot of times, we've seen these, perceived wide receiver 2s in these offenses be the ones to be the better pick. And I don't see why it couldn't be Waddle. We have a question in the chat from Matthew Bingham. One offense we want to pick your head on, Chris, is Denver. Nathaniel Hackett in Denver is really interesting case study. He's saying that the Broncos will run faster under Russ, but they were the slowest neutral pace team the last couple of years with Rodgers in Green Bay. How do you see that situation? We've talked about this in the GOAT District before, where we worried about the pace slightly. I think the defense in Denver is great, and they have 2 capable running backs. So that worries me a little bit, just in terms of maybe we don't get the fireworks we're expecting. How are you looking at Denver?
I do like that offense. The pace is something that I'll keep my eye on. If they show us anything, if they tip their hand at all in preseason, which you guys know nowadays with the schedule with preseason, we're not really getting much out of these teams. But if we could see, a first half of the whole starting unit in there and see maybe their tempo a little bit, that'd be great. I wish, these are answers that I wish we all wish we had, how fast they were going to play up tempo. I will say this about the Denver offense. Yes, I am interested in it. Yes, I will be investing in it. I think that today the offense, took a completely different step with Tim Patrick going down. Losing Tim Patrick out of this Denver offense, it puts Sutton and Judy, in my opinion, even on a higher, standard right now. I think you got to move both of them up. The route trees, the target trees just, became a little smaller. That's something I always look for on every team. Is there 5 options in the pass game, or is there 2.5? Can I rely every week on, just say, look back at the Vikings in the last couple of years. It was Jefferson and Thielen. Every week you knew these guys were getting double digit targets. Now when you're looking at Sutton and Judy, in my opinion, this offseason, you're like, all right, there's weeks that, Patrick can show up for 7 for 70 and a touchdown. And is he going to bite into their, targets? And Alberto is there. And then you have the run game. Well, now we just got one big piece out of that offense. So, that offense, I think you'll see Sutton and Judy climb up a little bit now going forward.
How about KJ Hamler, guys?
Him too.
Is he where do you see him kind of settling in? Do you think he reaches, because Tim Patrick was going, you'd see him go in like the 12th round in FFPC, and you see people that looked at him as like an arbitrage play to Sutton and Judy. There's a lot of really big Tim Patrick believers, and this actually messed up a lot of underdog teams, this injury. And Dan, do you see KJ Hamler, rising up? I know you have some apprehension about him.
Well, other than the fact that he's like made of glass, that's my main concern. he just can't stay healthy, at least not since he's gotten to the pros. So, if he can make it through the preseason, we'll talk. Right now, I don't expect his value to be too high to the point where I wouldn't draft him, just based on the fact that I'm, terrified he'd be injured or anything like that. If he's going in the 14th round or later, if he gets injured, it's kind of almost a who cares situation, because those guys are more likely to, you're looking for somebody to hit, and you expect some misses. As far as the pace in Denver, a couple things on that. First off, every coach says almost without fail that they want to run fast every year. And, what actually happens can be completely different, but almost no coach goes in and says, we're going to really slow the pace down. The other thing is with Aaron Rodgers, a lot of times the slow pace was kind of on him, because he would sit at the line of scrimmage and use up the full, 40-second clock working on, trying to suss out the defense and figure out where their weakness was. So that makes for a little bit more slow paced offense. So Wilson has been, he's been on slow offenses before. We kind of think it was, Pete Carroll that was slowing him down, but, was it Wilson? I don't know. So I guess I'll believe it when I see it on the fast paced Denver offense.
And Chris, do you have you don't have to say whether you have a favorite or not, but are you drafting both Denver wide receivers at this point? Are you trying to mix it up, or do you find yourself drafting one more than the other?
No, I've been drafting both, to answer your question, Theo. Right now, honestly, my philosophy in online championship season, it's different than once I get into my mains. Right now, I'm not reaching for anybody in these drafts on a nightly basis. I'm sitting in my spot. I'm taking my value on players that I like. I'm not just taking value on players I don't like. Just whoever comes to me at a good price, that I like,
Chris froze up.
that's
for
who
a
I'm
second.
taking. So yeah, that back end of that middle of the middle of the fourth round, once you make that turn in the Nffc, Sutton comes into play, and then on the flip side, fourth into the fifth round, that's when Judy's been coming into play. So if they're sitting there, yeah, I will say this: I do have a nice Javante second round, Sutton, Judy, and Russ stack that I was able to put together, with Sutton falling to the end of the fourth, Judy on the flip side in the fifth. So that's a nice stack I think you're able to put together on an offense that I could see, blowing up. There's only so many offenses you could stack where you could see them being a hot team that every week is pumping out 30-plus points. I could see Denver being that team. But Theo, you're right. You bring up the other side of it. That defense, I think, is going to be a very strong defense. How many shootouts can they get into? On the flip side, they're in that AFC West, so we could see some fireworks on a weekly basis with teams having to catch up.
Yeah, and you could just paint a picture where you want a lot of AFC West guys. Would you guys both think that's the conference where, that's the division where we're going to see kind of the most fantasy friendly teams, or is that division kind of getting boosted up a little too much?
I
Yeah,
don't know. I mean, I think everybody's thinking the same thing for a good reason. But I do think sometimes people are going after it a little too hard. Like Denver's one of those teams that if I could stack them, I'm not going to be afraid to do it. But they're not a team that I'm going to be doing a lot of reaching to make the stack work. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at.
I'll say this to answer that one. You look around the league and all these other divisions, you really can't say, oh my God, look at these offenses and all these other divisions. Look at the NFC North. They got the Bears, Packers offense. Nobody's in love with this year. Same thing. You go to the AFC North, it's like hit or miss. The AFC South is nobody's going to get excited about any of these offenses. So yeah. All the attention in the offseason is been focused on that AFC West and those matchups and the quarterback matchups. That's what everybody's got, excited about. Then you look around the skill players on all these teams. It's like, yeah, there's a reason why we're all excited about the AFC West. Deservedly so. Real life and fantasy. There should be a lot of fireworks in these games.
And I do think that's something that, like, as high stakes and also like a fantasy football industry has been able to nail is the offense that's going to give us the most fireworks. That hasn't really backfired. I remember years ago it was the NFC South, and it paid off. I'm of the opinion that there's top-notch quarterback play. We like a number of the offensive players, and like we said, it's a division where we've seen fireworks in the past, and I think we'll continue seeing it. You brought up ADP and how you're not reaching. Do you have at this point a do not draft list of guys you're completely avoiding, or is it don't hate the player, hate the ADP, and you're willing to add some of those guys maybe if they fall in a draft?
Yeah, I mean, willing to draft them, sure. And there's certain guys that I'm like, I know that once September rolls around and it's main event season, those guys won't be on my team, barring a miracle, barring a drastic maybe 2-3 round fall or whatever. There's just guys I don't want, but we all like that. So yeah, at this point, there are guys that I know I don't want and I try and get away from, but it's also online championship season. And, do I sneak in a share or two of certain guys that when they come to me at value, I take them then just so I can have, a little bit here and there. Yeah, that's how I play it.
And I wanted to actually go over an online championship. We have on the board here let me put this on full screen. We have an online championship that I was in with Chris the other night. I picked out of the 10 hole with Nelson Sousa. Mike Sanda was in this draft. Chris, maybe you could talk a little bit about your build. You were team 3 here. You started out with Justin Jefferson, which is either you're taking Kupp or Jefferson. We don't have to really focus on that one.
Right.
But Travis Etienne, you took him towards the end of the second round. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that pick.
Yeah, this was an interesting draft, guys, for a lot of reasons. So I'm glad we're going over this one. Right now, I don't know about how you guys feel, but I've been the most comfortable drafting at the back end of the board all season so far. You know, I've put myself in the front. Obviously, we all have to do that. We have to put ourselves in uncomfortable positions. There's certain, where the board is landing right now. There's spots where I'd rather not be in right now. The front of the draft is that for me. So in this particular draft, getting Jefferson, which I love that, getting Jefferson. But on the back end, I wanted to make sure I get that running back right there in round 2. Do I love it, ETN? Yeah, I do. And I have a good amount of shares of him, and I will continue to keep adding shares. Most of my shares so far this season are in the 3rd round. This one, I took him in the 2nd round. I believe when did we do this draft? This was last week, right?
This was Friday. This was last Friday night.
Last Friday. So we're still fresh off of everybody panicking a little bit with James Robinson. Coming into the mix, where you saw ETN becoming, a steady force in the 2nd round for a while. And then the James Robinson news hits, about 10 days ago that he's, all of a sudden back in the mix and he's going to be at practice and he's practicing. And then he started dropping a little bit. I don't think James Robinson's going to be that huge of a factor with ETN. So right there, I'm taking Travis Etienne, a pass-catching back that I feel could be an absolute PPR monster this year. So much so because just where I know I'm going to set up in the 3rd and 4th rounds of this draft. So, if I go 0 RB here, it's a difficult build for me this year. I'm not in love with the running backs in that dead zone. So I want to make sure I come out of those first couple rounds with that RB1 bell cow that I can build off of. And when you're in the front of the board right now, your options are pretty slim. Now you'll look at the 3rd round, 3rd round reversal in the Nffc. You'll see Alvin Kamara there. That was before the news broke. I firmly expect now Kamara to be safely in the middle of the 2nd round going forward, if not higher, with the news that this case has been delayed. But, so I would have taken Kamara over ETN if the draft was tonight. But this ETN pick is mostly because I know what in my head, the end of the 3rd round to come around to the 4th round, I'm banging out 2 receivers there. So this is more of a look ahead with taking Travis Etienne there and jumping him a little bit when I know he was mostly going in the 3rd round at this point.
And Dan, I wanted to get your opinion on Chris brought up the 3rd round reversal. When you're picking like in the top half, or let's say anywhere in that anywhere in the first half of the first round, how does the 3rd round reversal kind of change or affect your team building philosophy? Like, are you more apt to try to add a balance, or how do you approach that, Dan?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty similar to what Chris is doing. I mean, I'm most likely going to come away with 1 or 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, just simply because, as Chris said, right now, there's nobody who's super appealing that you can be sure is going to drop into that what is the back half of the 3rd round, the front of the 1st round. So it just kind of makes it a weird spot, and the receivers there are fantastic, so there's just no reason to try to, reach and make a running back happen there. You're just better off grabbing those receivers and, not trying to force something that's not there.
Yeah. And don't you guys feel that as you go down the board, when you're in the top half, just say the top 4 over here, if you don't get that running back, the end of the 3rd and the beginning of the 4th, that's just all yellow stickers right now, right? And then when you come back around and you're at the end of the 5th round and the beginning of the 6th, when you make that next turn, late 50s, early 60s, that's when the yellow stickers just start to dry up a little bit. and now everybody's like, well, where am I going here? So you really want to have those 3 big wide receivers in your back pocket, because at that point, now you're going into, all right, am I going to build it where I go with a dead zone running back or 2? Am I going to take an elite quarterback? Because listen, nobody wants quarterbacks right now in these drafts. It's amazing. Quarterbacks drop. So can you land a Kyler or a Lamar, whoever you want right there? I see Waller and Kittle on a nightly basis just falling right into that spot in the beginning of the draft in that, 57 to 65 range. I got Kittle at 70 overall the other night. Just nobody wants Kittle and Waller. It's just it's like nobody, everybody forgot about the tight end, the elite tight end position. So it's just different pockets right now of drafts. And once you get a good feel of these drafts every night, how they're going to play out a little bit. Where you got to get your receivers, where you got to get your running backs. And it's always interesting to do these different builds. And I did it here. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it, as we go on here.
The next round, you go with Mike Williams. Are you drafting both Chargers wide receivers, or are you in the Mike Williams is ascending, Keenan potentially descending corner?
Yeah, I'm in that one, Theo. I didn't like I didn't like what I saw out of Keenan at the end of last year. He's turning 30. I know he's going ahead of Mike Williams right now. He's going in the beginning of that 3rd round. For me, they gave Mike Williams the big bucks. He's the younger guy. I just see, like 2 ships passing in the night. I just think Mike Williams is going to take over as the one in this offense, starting this year. And Keenan, starts to take a little bit of a step back.
Yeah, Mike Williams is funny because Mike Williams had that massive start to the year last year, and then he finishes well. It was like that middle that was weird, but he was injured those weeks. So
injured. He's just got to stay healthy, guys. He's always got these nagging little injuries, always has a little something. He's one of those guys that, you look up in the first quarter, he's limping off to the sideline with something. It's, he's one of those players. So I've always been a Mike Williams guy these last couple of years. I've always been in on him. I'll probably be, like I said, in on him again this year. But this is his last, last hurrah in my eyes for me.
And Dan, maybe you could kind of share your thoughts. I know you've talked about this on previous Go District podcasts, but kind of your outlook for those 2 wide receivers. And I'll ask Dan, are you more apt to take Keenan Allen in like a 12-man league, like we drafted last night, or in a super or varsity, an FFPC varsity and Nffc super, than you would be in kind of a larger tournament?
Yeah, I don't think he lends himself quite as well to the contests, but I do still value Allen. I think he's still going to be Herbert's security blanket. He's going to get a lot of stuff over the middle. What's going to tell the tale of the season is whether he's very efficient with what he gets or whether he's kind of inefficient with it. And as you guys are talking about, he was getting kind of inefficient last year. I don't know if there was more of an injury going on than what we knew about or something like that. I could certainly see that being the case. So I haven't totally given up hope on Allen, but I also know that in a tournament setting, he's more the guy who's going to get you, like 12 to 17 points rather than the guy who's going to get you 25 to 30 every now and then.
Mm-hmm. Chris, I want to touch on one guy you didn't select and I didn't select in this draft, but I know you were incredibly bullish on last year. Michael Pittman, I took him the other night at the 212. He's goes at the 301 here. Do you think – I think pretty much every guest we've had on the GOAT District likes Michael Pittman for this year, but do you think we're starting to see him get drafted kind of at his peak range?
Yeah, I do, especially that I started seeing him come off the board 20, 21 overall, 22. Now he's firmly like a second rounder where, a month ago he'd make it to the 3rd round, in every draft. But now he's becoming a late second rounder in most of these drafts. So, yeah, I think this is where he's going now is his peak. And maybe we are starting to overdraft him a little bit, but he's always, to me, since he got drafted, been that prototypical future alpha number one, and that's the way we're drafting him, I guess, now. I did like him last year. He was a great price on the board last year. And this year, I was hoping that he wasn't going to get hyped up as much as he was in this offseason. And like you said, everybody just seems to love him. Nobody has something negative to say about him. And the spot on the draft board reflects that.
So these two would never really be an issue. But Chris, would you take Michael Pittman or Mike Williams? Which one do you like?
No, Pittman. Yeah, Pittman? It'll be Pittman all day. Yes.
Okay. At what point do you looking at this board? Where do you think Pittman should have been going? Probably somewhere in the third, but not necessarily at the beginning.
I would take Pittman over Keenan Allen. So I know Keenan went before him in this. I like Pittman over Allen. No, I think he went. Listen, he went in the right spot when you look at everybody else. I think I've been taking T. Higgins over Pittman. I have him a spot or two above. But that's the thing. I'm taking Pittman over Waddle. I'm taking Pittman over AJ Brown. I'm taking Pittman. I like DJ Moore a lot. I think there's a case to be made for Pittman versus DJ Moore. I'll say that. After that, I would take Pittman over every receiver off the board after that. So, yeah, right. Listen, he's going in the right place.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Pittman he's very like Matt Ryan's wide receiver one. Historically has been heavily targeted. And I think Pittman can win different ways. He can be a low ADOT guy. And I think, he has potential in the red zone as well. So I think he's there. I just worry about when we talk about league winners, for him to be the league winner, I think we need 160 targets. And that does worry me a little bit because it gives you a little bit, less room for error. But, like I said, I drafted him the other night at the 212, so I'm obviously in on him as well. Dan, is there any other OTC choices in this third round that you see that maybe you would have done differently? Or anything that stands out as a bad pick?
Nothing that really stands out as being really egregious. No. I mean, a lot of these are just, different people prefer different players. I'm not taking Chubb there, but I know a lot of people do. That's where I expect to see Chubb go.
And then if we're keeping track, Nelson and I took Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, and then T. Higgins from the back end at the 10 spot. The fourth round, last summer, Chris, you spoke glowingly about Kyle Pitts being one of the best tight end prospects you've ever seen. And you also talked about Jamar Chase as one of the best wide receiver prospects you've ever seen. So you had great foresight, when you were in the GOAT District last summer with that. Now you're drafting Kyle Pitts. I took him this week in an NFFC at the 3-4 turn. So I took him right ahead where you were. Right. He seems like he could be a league tilting guy in this range for NFFC. Is that how you're seeing him as well?
Yeah, that's my first share of Kyle Pitts. And it's mostly because of, like I said, I've been doing most of my drafts in that 9 to 12 range, that 8 to 12 range. So you're not going to take him, 25, 26, 27. So I'm too early for him there. And I'm never going to get him at, 45 to 48 in that range. So he's always going right there in the middle. So this was the perfect opportunity for me to get a nice share of Kyle. And I said to myself, as before this draft, every draft you're in, you say, all right, in this spot, this would be a nice, opportunity to get a certain player. And I remember saying, hey, if Pitts is on the board early fourth here on my turn, no matter what kind of build I have, that's going to be an opportunity for me to get Kyle Pitts, a Kyle Pitts share. And that's what I did. So, yeah, it was a different look for me. I don't usually have a tight end early, but if I'm going to jump at tight end in these online championships right now, I want to try and get a good amount of Kyle Pitts this season because, yeah, I do think he's going to be a league-winning type play at tight end.
Dan, Team 7 takes Gabe Davis ahead of DK Metcalf. I'm on Ross St. Brown. Godwin, I think there'll be different opinions on because of when he comes back. But Brandon Cooks, Amari Cooper, Juju, Jerry Jeudy, Rashad Bateman, and he ends up with Rashad Bateman a round later. Is that the range you're considering Gabe Davis right now, or do you think that that's maybe a little high? Start with Dan, and then Chris, I'd love to hear your opinion on Gabe.
Yeah.
Well, if I want Gabe Davis, I guess that's where I have to consider him because that's kind of where he's going. And he's a player, again, I don't want to be shut out on, but I don't have a strong enough belief in him that I'm sitting here going, yeah, when I get to my mains, I'm going to be loading up on Gabe Davis. Jury's still out on him for me. So I'll, when I'm in, kind of my mid-stake stuff and doing best ball tourneys and things like that, I'll be getting some shares. But we'll see how training camp goes and what the buzz is from the coaching staff and everything else, and see how he looks like he's going to fit into that offense. I mean, he's definitely shown plenty of flashes before, so he's a tough guy to fade completely. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I see it the same way you do, Dan. Honestly, I've taken a couple shares of Gabe Davis. It's a stack that you could put together. I was lucky enough. I was actually in a draft with Nelson the other night, and I put together. I got Josh Allen to fall to me at 47 overall, which I believe it was the latest that he fell in any of these online championships. So it was just one of those drafts where all 12 owners are sitting there saying, I'm waiting on quarterback. And you come in with a mind frame like that. And, I had Diggs in the 11 hole, got Allen, came back around, and I said, well, this is the type this is the draft to take Gabe Davis and build the stack. And that's what I did. So nice little bill stack there. You could put that together with a Diggs and Gabe Davis. But Gabe Davis right now, I think, coming off of the 4-touchdown game versus the Chiefs in the playoffs, he's gotten hyped out of control. He's yes, he's very talented. He's still by far the number 2 in this offense. So when you compare him with the other receivers that you could select in this mid to late 4th round, early 5th, there's other guys I prefer over Gabe Davis. So I won't have much of Gabe Davis. I don't see right now in come main event season, but right now I'm getting a decent amount of shares on him here and there.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you guys. I don't want to get shut out on Gabe Davis, but I think oftentimes I find myself going in another direction when I'm OTC. Not necessarily a guy I dislike. It's just more attractive options kind of right near him. So he's just super, super interesting.
We love the offense, we
right.
That's it is. It's not one of these offenses where he's like, there's certain offenses where you want a piece of the number 2 receiver because it could support it. Look at T. Higgins, T. Higgins is a late 2nd, early 3rd rounder because we love the Bengals offense. This is an explosive offense. Same thing with the Bills. You got a big time quarterback. So, do I think when I see him come off the board in the middle of the 4th, do I say, not for me? Yeah. But you could potentially see him having those big spike games, throughout the season.
We went Breece Hall at the end of the 4th round here. You're a New York City guy. You're really in tune with the Jets and the Giants. What is your thoughts on Breece Hall? Is he being drafted in the correct range? And kind of your expectations for him for the season?
Yeah, so I think you stole him here in this draft that late. And I think since this draft, I guess the last 4 or 5 days, you can see his ADP trending up to where now he's going at the end of the 3rd round, early 4th round. And I had this conversation with a friend and was like, hey, listen, after these big running backs in the first 2 rounds come off the board in your early 2nd round, like a James Conner, and I guess Nick Chubb and Cam Akers, like right in that little pocket where they go mid 3rd, you feel like there's a lull. It's like everybody sits back and is like, all right, we're done with the running backs for a while. Like I said, the 4th and 5th round is all yellow this year. So everybody starts hitting on all these receivers. And it's like, well, when the drop off comes, who do you see? Who do you see could be that running back that potentially takes a step up and climbs up to that late 3rd round, early 4th, and even potentially higher? to me, the answer is easy. It's Breece Hall. And, all I think he needs is one preseason game where he goes crazy. He looks unbelievable, catching balls out of the backfield, maybe drops 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I think come main event season, we're going to see him right there in that 25 to 30 range. Breece Hall, he would be my prediction as the running back that's going to be that hot name come end of August, early September in Mainz with the money on the line. And everybody says, hey, this is the rookie running back that's going to win me all the money.
Right. And if I can just throw in, I mean, this is a prime example of why we don't chase. Because if you take a look from DJ Moore in the 3rd round all the way to Jerry Jeudy in the 5th round, that's 21 picks. 16 of them were wide receivers. I mean, there was, all those receivers are definitely, valuable players and all that. But there was definitely some chasing going on there. I mean, Hall probably should have gone before he did. And, you just see guys kind of wanting to get in before all the good receivers are gone. So they're following the herd rather than thinking about what's really available.
Yeah, that goes back to the sides of each board. You're in tough spots. If you're at if you start off, running back, like look at team 12. He starts off running back. Well, now he knows he's got to hit the receiver position at 48, 49, but he passed and he takes the value with Zeke. If that's, if you guys see it the way I do, you're getting a big time running back to put as your flex play here.
Right. You can't go, honestly, like his start, Derrick Henry and Saquon followed up by Pittman and Cooks. I think he had a nice structured start. And I think the Zeke pick, and I really think that the Schultz pick kind of really messed him up. And I think it's hard to play catch up at wide receiver where he ends up having to use that Myers, Hardman, and Julio Jones pick back to back is just, they're kind of harder bets. And he's forced to do that. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that.
Yeah, it's easy to get excited with the names, but then there's certain times you got to look down the road, like I always say, and say, all right, well, listen, if he wanted to take Zeke there and build his team with a running back heavy team and make Zeke his RB3 and flex play, yeah, that's fine. But you got to come back with either that, that Murray pick or Schultz and dig back into the wide receiver room, or else your wide receiver 3 is going to look like a Sky Moore and a Garrett Wilson and Jacoby Myers. And I think you're playing catch up at that point.
Yeah, and not to bag on this guy too much or anything, but part of the deal is that you take that 3rd running back in this format where you need to start 3 wide receivers, and you're saying, okay, that's going to be my flex, but then he follows it up with a quarterback and a tight end. So he's got kind of an early quarterback and kind of an early tight end, and that's what really puts him in the hole. Like if he'd gone wide receiver there and waited around until Prescott came back, he could have built a different stack with the Cowboys that was probably a little bit better and more balanced rather than trying to go Elliott Schultz, and then he leaves himself in a better spot on the wide receivers.
The only 3 running back starts that I've liked this year have been 3 straight running backs to start out the draft or 2 straight running backs with Breece Hall, which can sometimes be 3 straight running backs to start the draft. It's just, it's so hard to play catch up, from Dan and I talking on the show to all the, Chris Vaccaro, Nelson Sousa, Glenn Lowy, Tommy Libretti, Chris Ebel, any of the NFFC guests we've had on have all kind of reiterated the fact that it's really hard to catch up at wide receiver. And I'll throw FFWC in the same mix here where you just don't necessarily see impactful waiver wire guys either. There's not too many of them throughout the year. So if you miss out at wide receiver in the draft, you're playing catch up all year long. One wide receiver that we expect to move up. You took him here at the end of the 5th round. You take Michael Thomas at the 5'10", and Dan, you pounded the table for him last night in the Pros versus Joes. Do you guys expect Michael Thomas to be moving up boards? I mean, the brief video I'm seeing from training camp, he looks explosive. He looks back to his normal self. And kind of where do you guys see him kind of settling in as we get towards main event season at the end of the month?
I see him moving up and settling in main event season in the 4th. Depending on what happens here the rest of camp, as long as he keeps looking good, maybe he flashes in a preseason game, if they even let him play in the preseason game. But, people keep putting these hype videos out, showing him looking good and everything. And listen, we're all wide receiver whores, come main event season. And what happens during main event season? The wide receivers get pushed up the board more and more and more. So right now, I was just taking my discount, Michael Thomas, right here, end of the 5th round. I don't think you'll see him there much longer. And, I'm looking at this board. I will be surprised if Michael Thomas doesn't come off the board in most drafts ahead of Chris Godwin.
I'm with you on that. How about, Dan, where are you at with kind of how high you would push him at this point, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, if he stays healthy, I don't have any problem pushing him up into the 4th round for sure. Just because of the fact that, I know we're all kind of, wore out on the Michael Thomas thing. And that's what's affecting his ADP right now, I think, and kind of keeping his ADP depressed where it is. Because it's been basically, 2 years or almost 3 years since we've really seen Michael Thomas be Michael Thomas. But on the other hand, you got to give the guy credit for not coming back too early. He tried to play through it the year that the injury happened, and it was a disaster. And he said, I'm just not going to do that again. And he didn't. And so, I for one am, I like the fact that he did take that time, and he is, waiting until he got it right. And so I'm expecting that he's going to be able to kind of move right back into where he was. They're not going to pass as much or anything like that. It's Jameis, it's not Drew Brees, but Michael Thomas, I think, could definitely be the engine on that offense, and especially if Kamara misses time this year, that's going to put even more on Michael Thomas.
Yeah. And I'll say Michael Thomas or Gabe Davis right now, guys.
I'll take Gabe Davis in that scenario.
That's tough. Right now, I'd probably take Gabe Davis, but I mean, I could see in main event season me taking Michael Thomas over Gabe Davis.
Yeah,
it could happen. I can understand that. There would have to be the right circumstances for it, but I could understand that happening. If Michael Thomas is looking good in the preseason, and the reports on Gabe have been just kind of nothing out of the ordinary, I might push him up over him.
Yeah. If you look at
right now, I think I'm Gabe, but I think what Dan is saying makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Chris.
That's a big jump right there. If Michael Thomas is going to come off the board before Gabe Davis, especially in this draft, I mean, what is it? Like a dozen wide receivers went in after Gabe Davis to Michael Thomas. There's a lot of guys he's got to jump. But for me, I'm just saying in this particular build, the wide receivers, like I said, end of 5th round here, where I took Thomas. This was the perfect, opportunity scenario build for me to grab this Michael Thomas share. I go with the elite tight end in the 4th, which I didn't plan on doing. I thought it would be all receivers. I get the Kyle Pitts share. Now I know I'm stuck. Now I have to go back to the wide receiver position. And there's that wide receiver run that we talk about in the 5th here. You see all the names, Judy, Bateman, Mooney, Elijah Moore comes off the board. And now I'm like, this is where it tails off, right, guys? This is where it tails off. You see Waller and Kittle come up next because the guys to the left of me say, all right, listen, I'm not going to take a step down at wide receiver. Let me make the right move and take a step up and give myself a strong tight end team here. That's what they do with Waller and Kittle. And now there's the drop off a little bit, in my opinion. Kirk, Thielen, what do you want to do with D-Hop? I take D-Hop in this scenario saying, all right, I'm going to take D-Hop, play the long game, and hopefully come back and get myself a solid 5-6 that, can fill in for a while for him. And that's how I tried to build out this team.
From 1912 as a question in the chat, OTC right now, today, if we're drafting a main event, Jalen Waddle or Deontay Johnson, either one you can jump in.
Oof. Dan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take Waddle here. I mean, it's close.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go Waddle.
Yeah, no, it's Waddle for me also. Deontay, I just got that bad taste in my mouth this year so far. He's holding out. He wants his money. The quarterback situation is all over the place. And I'm a little worried about where Deontay's coming off the board right now. I expect him to be the one wide receiver that starts slipping, from where he's been going off the board. I expect him to start falling down a little bit.
I'm Waddle as well. I have drafted some Deontay Johnson. And I think that this board, there's some drafts where you see them go a little closer than this one. These guys, they're maybe about a round apart in this one, but that's a great question from 1912 because they're both like these super enticing guys based on what we've seen in the past. But isn't it kind of funny that we're a lot more comfortable with Tua Tagovailoa than obviously Trubisky, but we have at least a little bit of history there where we've seen Waddle succeed with Tua. Whereas Mitch, it's like a mixed bag, and there's all these question marks in Pittsburgh right now. So I might be with you, Chris. I think it might be time to pump the brakes on Deontay, and at least until there's a big correction.
I will say this. I have consistently, since he came into the league, undervalued Deontay Johnson. So there's a chance I'm doing it again. The last Pittsburgh receiver I can remember doing that with was Hines Ward. Always used to undervalue that guy. Because he wasn't that exciting, but he just got the job done. So Deontay Johnson, he's one of those guys, again, if I'm going to be in a confined league rather than a attorney, Deontay Johnson has a little bit more appeal to me.
I want to backtrack. We were on the topic of this wide receiver range. Brandon Cooks, last year, I drafted him a lot, and he was great success. I drafted him in the 8th round of an FFPC main event with Andrew Schellenberg that did very well. And now he's going, in the 4th round. And we've seen him go early 4th in FFPC. I've seen him, he's kind of safely in the 4th round, we should say. Do you think that he's a capped upside player that maybe is kind of like getting drafted towards the peaks? Or do you think that there's a chance for just an absolute target smash season, Chris?
I think the latter. I think there's a totally a shot at a target smash season, and I can't see him coming off the board any later than he's going. He consistently goes end of 4th round, right at that turn. 45 to 52 range. I wouldn't have any problem with anybody taking him at the 3-4 turn. He's the clear number one in an offense that you could see them playing catch up a lot. I think the kid Mills, has proved last year he could get him the ball and force feed it to him. I don't see any reason. I don't see much not to like about Brandon Cooks this year. If you're drafting him as your, wide receiver 3, if you go with a hero RB approach and you go running back 3 straight receivers, if he's your 3, I think you're thrilled. And vice versa. I think if you go running back, and you hit him up as your wide receiver 2, I think that's a perfect build too. So Cooks. If you get him in the 5th, start going to church. You're in a good position.
Dan, thoughts on Cooks?
Yeah, I like Cooks. I might be not quite as high on him as Chris is, but I'm pretty high on him. I don't have a problem taking him where he's going right now. I certainly like him better than Cooper. I like him better than Juju. I like him better than Judy. I like him better than Godwin, probably right now as well. So, and maybe even Amon-Ra St. Brown. So he's in the right range for me.
Full disclosure, Dan and JD and I were practically praying for Cooks at one point last night, and we missed him. I think it was 1 or 2 picks, Danny. We got snaked. It was 1 pick away.
Yeah,
Cooks last night.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. If you and not Dan, I'm sorry, Theo. If you and Nelson, if Breece Hall comes off the board there, and you're in that spot and Hall's off the board. Are you taking Cooks there, or are you going with any of these other receivers that came off the board after?
I think Cooks would definitely have been a guy we would have considered there. I like him, and I think you make some good points. I would say Cooks probably would have been the pick there. I'm looking at the board in case we would have maybe pushed somebody up, but I think it would have been Cooks. One thing about Cooks that I think is super interesting is like John Mechie. It's a very sad situation, but I think him missing the season kind of solidifies Cooks a little more, where they're going to have to lean on him. They don't get an exciting talent coming in mid-season. And I think that he could see a very like an early target share that kind of sustains. And he's been, more he's been more reliable in terms of playing games than I think his reputation leads on. I mean, people think Brandon Cooks is this guy who misses all this game, but he's been pretty Teflon in terms of being there out on the field. So yeah, I like Cooks.
That's true. I'm sorry. It is, Theo. It's true because, you go back 4 years ago, concussion after, a lot of concussion issues. You always felt like he was unreliable. There was issues getting traded here, there. Now it's kind of like he's settled in. He's got his feet under him and he's kind of reliable. And I don't know if people are a year behind on the fact that maybe this guy is actually reliable now in the, second half of his career.
One guy next to him is Amari Cooper. We talked to Matt Schauf last night about his thoughts on the Cleveland offense. With Deshaun Watson getting 6 games and you have clarity on the situation, does Amari Cooper become a guy you're interested in or avoiding, or kind of your general thoughts on him this year?
No, now that Watson got 6 games, he's actually come back into my draft picture. He's another guy I expect. It's funny, in the last week, all of a sudden it was guys that I was like, I won't own much of him, and fading certain guys like a Michael Thomas or Amari Cooper. Well, now all of a sudden, Michael Thomas shows up at camp, all of a sudden looking okay. And we'll see him, we'll monitor him. But, now he's, back in the plans a little bit. He's draftable in on my board. And now with Cooper, I think there's certain plans that you have to, put through if you're going to draft a Cooper. If you could get him at the right price, I think there's certain, ways to go building about a team if you draft an Amari Cooper where you can justify it. I'll put it that way.
Can I say that I just hate Godwin and Cooper on the same team, though?
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about,
right?
Dan. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not starting the league out 4-0, despite your Najee, DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, where, if Kamara is there week 1, you could potentially get a ton from your running backs. You're potentially taking a 0 from Godwin.
Even worse, look down the board, Gallup too.
Right.
Oh man.
This is a lesson for our listeners right here, not how to build a team unless you think you're going to get by somehow through September or October and then come back with a juggernaut. But you don't want to draft this many question marks at the receiver position early, especially a Godwin and Gallup, who you might not see till October.
Yeah, two seasons ago, Cooper had 130 targets 2 seasons ago. Do you guys see him over or under that target range? Do you think that's a comfortable number for him this year?
How many did you say?
130 was how many he had, not last season, but the season before. Last season he was saved by touchdowns, but he saw the targets 2 years ago for CeeDee Lamb's rookie year. Do you guys see him hitting that? I mean, he's interesting to me because like last year he had that incredible game 1 where that was like a big part of his scoring output was in like 2 games. I worry a little bit about him having to step back, but it sounds like Stefanski likes him. I'm just trying to get a gauge of how targeted do we see him being? Because like Mooney and Cooks are both there in that range, and I think we can project them as high target guys. Michael Thomas, a high target guy. But Cooper, it's like he's got to hit that in order to produce. Do we see him hitting that target range?
It would be close, maybe. It kind of depends on how much they pass in the first 6 games.
Same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To me, I mean, I'm not a Cooper guy. And for me, the problem just has always been that he has way too many games of, like 8, 9, 10 points. And, and then he'll go out and he'll throw up a 30 or a 35 burger a couple times a season. And then maybe, one somewhere around 20, but everything else is just low. And, I'm not too worried about consistency most of the time, but when you're one of those guys who just, unless it's best ball and unless you're cheap, it's just hard to live with that in a managed lineup, because you're going to put him in, he's going to kill you. And, eventually he's going to come through for you, or even worse yet, you might get so tired of getting killed by him, you take him out and you put in somebody else you think has a better matchup, and then Cooper goes off. He's just a frustrating guy for me, Dylan.
For me, I kind of like a few of those wide receivers going right after him as well. Yeah. I won't say he's like a guy I refuse to draft, but I'm kind of with Dan. I have some apprehension, but again, you can't, turn your nose in the air at a wide receiver one,
right?
That's had some fantasy success as well. So he's super interesting to me.
This guy, I mean, we also got to remember here, this was a little early for Cooper in this draft on this board. He's right at that turn. Most of the drafts I've seen him go, late 5th, early 6th. Now, like I was saying, there's a scenario where I could build a team together where if I could get him in the 6th as my number 4, and then put a receiver I like early in the season later on as my 5 or 6. Let's play the game of I take Cooper in the 6th as my number 4, and I don't have to force him in the first 6 weeks here, and I could come back in the 8th or 9th and go a little early and get a Rondell Moore, and then slip Rondell Moore into my flex for the first 6 weeks while D-Hop is out, and play that game while I don't have to force feed Cooper into my lineup, and then play the flip game come week 6 when Watson shows up, and now I have a legit, wide receiver 2 on my hands, and Cooper as my flex, and Rondell maybe gets the job done through September for me, or a receiver such as that, a Russell Gage, where Russell Gage is falling down the board a little bit now. If I can scoop up Gage as a 5 on a Cooper build, those are the types of builds that I'm talking about once you draft a Cooper or a Hopkins type of player.
And apologies to the chat. The chat is lit. I am no JD when it comes to getting questions on the board quickly, but I want to throw a couple in there. Shout out to the Guilds. Great FFPC player. He's asking you about the Gage dip. You mentioned Gage. Do you think you think the market's overcorrecting, seeing Gage go in that 8th round with the Julio signing and the Godwin potentially not missing as much?
Yeah, I just think that once this news of the Julio signing and then the Godwin right on the same day of him, not going on the pup, we really didn't. A lot of people didn't know where to place Gage on the board, how big to drop him. I think the first draft or 2 I did a while back, I was all in on Gage, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get the legit number 2. I was in the boat that we weren't going to see Godwin until November, the earliest, if not December. I thought Godwin's out of the picture here. People were fooling themselves thinking he was going to come back early. And obviously there was no Julio, and then Gronk had already retired. So I'm saying, all right, I could get Tom Brady as my quarterback with all the attention on Mike Evans, and he's going to make Russell Gage an 8-catch-a-game guy, just peppering him with targets all over the field. So I was in on Gage then, and now everybody had to recorrect, on the board. So early on, yeah, but I could see that, having a pivot off of Gage once, maybe mid-October rolls around. But I could see Gage getting off to a hot start here. I still don't expect to see Godwin the first, 3-4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I think there's not a whole lot of clarity with that injury. I don't think they'll rush him. And I think your 4-week thing might be a pretty reasonable guess. Dan, you think it's an overcorrection for Russell Gage? You think he could be like this year's Hunter Renfrow, at least for a month to start the season?
Man, I think he could be this year's Hunter Renfrow pretty much all year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Julio has definitely got plenty of his own question marks. you got Godwin coming back from a severe injury, and sometimes even when they do come back, they're not all the way back to what they used to be. If Gage has inserted himself by the time Godwin gets back, if Gage has inserted himself as a reliable cog in that offense, somebody that Brady feels real comfortable working with, I don't see that changing all year. Just like it was with Carr and Renfrow last year. Waller goes out, Renfrow all of a sudden starts getting peppered with targets, and even in games when Waller came back in, that didn't change that much for Renfrow.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a steal here on this board. Just looking at it off the top of my head, I think this is 91 overall for Gage. So 91 overall. Without looking, I don't know what he got, if he got him as his number 5 or what, but that's home run city. I think. I mean, you got to remember Russell Gage was going in the 50s early on in drafts, before all the hell broke loose in Tampa. So yeah, this is an overcorrection. I'm sure he comes back up and moves into the late 70s, 80s. Once these receivers start moving up, I think he'll be in the 70s.
Shout out to Kevin Wheeler, who is now with the 33rd team. Kevin's one of the best rankers out there. He says that Godwin's going to come back when Julio gets injured. So at least that would create an easy to predict target share. I want to get to 1912's question. And we can hold up on the Trey Lance, because I'll ask you about him in a second. But 2 running backs, you drafted Miles Sanders towards the back end of the 7th round. I took him 7-12 this weekend. So he's like definitely a beat up asset for a guy who at one point was a 1st-round draft pick in the NFFC. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire is also kind of in that range. Here we see him go in the late 6th round. Those guys right now in the last 2 weeks on OCs are running back 27 and running back 29. So they're high-end RB3s right now. Are you drafting them structurally, or do you find that they're maybe a little bit too beat up?
No, I like them where they're going on the board here. Sanders' ADP right now is 84 overall. And depending on your build, if he can be your RB3, I think it's a perfect shot to, on a player to take a shot on where he could exceed and be a solid RB2 when you get him in this 8th round. I think the hate for these, running backs in this range, some of them justified, some of it, everybody hates Josh Jacobs. I still don't understand the Singletary hate. I think he should be going higher on the board. There's Elijah Mitchell. All these guys are the reasons why people are out here drafting 0 RB teams and going, wide receiver heavy, because then you land right in this 6th, 7th, 8th round, and you're getting starting running backs, guys that could touch the ball 15, 20 times a week. Singletary, Sanders, Mitchell, Jacobs. Do they come with some warts? Yeah. Can they bust out? Yeah. That's the reason why they're going 7th, 8th round. All these guys. These aren't the guys that we're all clamoring for. Those are the guys that are in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, But everybody's going to have an opinion on which ones you want to kind of get a couple shares of and which ones you want to kind of stay away from. For me, Miles Sanders behind this offensive line in Philly. I know it hasn't been pretty the last couple of years. I could chalk it up to injury sometime. Coach saying the right thing, saying, hey, he's our lead guy. We just rotate some backs in. Yeah, Gainwell's going to catch some balls on 3rd down. I just don't see that. I just don't see any other back there that's, going to get 12 to 15 carries like I could see Sanders getting. So I'll come back in on Sanders one time, especially on a build like this when I have to, this is the range to get my RB2. And it would have been nice if I could have came back with a Ramondre Stevenson and have a 2-3 combo, but I missed out on him. But yeah, Sanders at this price, I'll take most of the time.
Dan, anything to add on those 2 running backs? I know we've talked about it about 10 times this offseason, those 2 guys specifically.
Yeah, I mean, really anytime, once you hit the 6th round here, for Dobbins, Dillon on, right through Pollard at least. I think the running backs are in play anywhere in there. I wouldn't have any problem taking most of those guys, even in the late 6th, early 7th. They could go earlier than they are, and I'd still be fine with taking them.
These are the controversial running backs, all of these guys, the Gibsons and all these guys. But it just goes back to the build of, do I want to have a 0 RB build where I'm just loaded at receiver and tight end, quarterback, everything, and then hit these rounds of 7, 8, 9 and have to rely on 2 of these guys? Or do I want to have my bell cow already and then, hit this range and then say, all right, let me take a chance on 2 of these guys in the 7th, 8th, 9th rounds and hope that one of them elevates themselves to a solid RB2 I can depend on every week, and then go from there once I have my JT or McCaffrey or Eckler or whoever from that front of the board, locked in.
And definitely listen to Chris when he talks 0 RB, because Chris has taken down an overall with a 0 RB build, and he was one of the first highly successful fantasy guys doing that. So Chris, I like how you're able to change your strategy year by year, and you're not attached to the value, not attached to the philosophy over value. But he certainly knows what he's talking about when it comes to 0 RB. And do you feel like guys like Chris, you brought up like Ramondre Stevenson, like, do you think this year is setting up for another year we're gonna see hero builds be very successful, where you can go with a guy like a Devin Singletary or a Miles Sanders and then follow up with one of these high upside guys that are appealing? Or do you sometimes like the look of these 2 RB starts?
I like both.
Yeah,
they're
right?
both. I guess it's the biggest thing in our industry, right? Where every summer everybody sits around, what's the winning strategy? Well, the winning strategy is to pick the right players in each round, and I can, you, any of us can do it anyway. Every draft, we're in a bunch of drafts. I'm going to have 0 RB builds. I'm going to have hero RB builds, or the one bell cow, the way I refer to it. I'm going to have builds that I start 2 running backs, sometimes even 3 running backs. You could do it any which way. I just think we practice, we get all these reps in these online championships and everything else throughout the summer, just to see what spots on the board we're the most comfortable with each philosophy. Right. I could be more comfortable drafting 2 RB starts at the end of the first and second round, at the end of the first round, and not that comfortable with that strategy in the beginning. So I know when main event season comes by and I get a 2 spot, okay, I'll build off of Taylor or McCaffrey, but I'm not coming back with another second running back just because I've practiced it enough where I'm not putting myself in a spots that I've failed in during online championship season, where I don't like the rest of the way the team builds out, building off of 2 running backs from that side of the board. So that's what July and August is for. It's to put yourself in spots where where you want to build out your team, how you want to build out your teams strategy-wise from each spot on the board.
All strategies work if you pick the correct players. And I think that this year is setting up for, like Chris said, you can go in multiple directions. I think it stems back to me where it's flat. You find like the mid-second to like the back to like the mid-first. You might have some guys that it's somewhat flat based on how you see them. So I think that it's how you set up early kind of dictates what you do for the rest of the draft. But I think this year flexibility is the right word. Dan, I know you're super flexible with your builds. Are you seeing it that same way this year?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of it is you've got to be, willing to take the value where it comes to you. And to me, the first few rounds, I'm not trying to dictate what I'm doing too much there. But on the other hand, I'm also always looking at my draft, like building it backwards, basically. So like a perfect example of this is Chris knew what he had coming in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds was probably going to be wide receiver, tight end thrown in there somewhere. And, so he knew he needed to get that running back sometime in the first couple rounds, right? But other than that, I mean, he could just sit back and cherry pick that value. And that's what you want to do. You want to have an awareness of what's coming up and what you're likely to get in the future and let that influence what you're getting now, but also not be afraid to take that value. Kyle Pitts, Breece Hall, picks like that.
Yeah. And listen, the zero RB builds, I want to just say a couple. Thank you for saying that, Theo, with everything. But I think you got to always constantly change. That would be stubborn of me to have success for the years I did a while back, always going zero RB like I did, and then not changing with the times or not coming off of that strategy and just going back to it every year. And now, look, people are still going to stick with it. People still swear by it. Listen, Tommy Loretti just won a ton of money with zero RB builds. So you can win with it still. You just have to be able to know, listen, if I'm in a draft and this isn't the time to execute it, you got to be able to get off of it and know how to get out of that and build a certain way. You can't just go into the draft and say, that's it. Zero RB is what I'm doing. I'm starting this draft off 4 wide receivers, 5 wide receivers, and not be able to adjust, in my opinion. And the other thing I'll say is, you look at these drafts, the boards are shrinking big time. And I'd hate to get myself in a position where I'm in that 10th round, right in that 100 to 120 range, where you see these last of the, not reliable, but running backs that we all are liking to put on our team as a 4 or a 5, to put yourself in a position where you need these guys to perform as your 2 or 3 every week. And then you get past this section of the drafts now, and it's no man's land at running back, in my opinion. So I want to make sure that in that range, I have a couple of running backs that I can bail myself out if I'm a heavy wide receiver team through those first six rounds.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense.
And shout out to Tommy Libretti. We had Tommy on the show. We highly recommend the episode he was on. We deep dove into dead zone running backs, a range where Tommy regularly drafts his running backs as a zero RB guy. It was a great show. Highly recommended. Still relative news that you could find in that, despite the couple injuries here and there. One question in the chat, Dave Gladstone. What's up with the 2 defenses, Chris?
Did I do two defenses in this one? I rarely do. Dave, I rarely do. Say that again.
I said, did you get auto-picked on the Chargers again, or was that just...
No, I didn't. I very rarely do. I am... I'll let this cat out of the bag. I do love the Colts defense. That's a regular of mine in that 16th round range. And I think I just got to that last 20th round right there. And I actually am pretty high on the Chargers defense as well. And, certain drafts, hey, listen, we're going 20 rounds. Certain drafts, you get into the 20th. You get sniped a little bit on a couple of your late round guys. And you say, hey, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity to take the 2 defenses. Nffc, listen, here's another thing I always say. People draft shame you to death. Anybody, they'll look and they'll, oh my God, this guy drafted 3 or 4 quarterbacks. This guy drafted 3 tight ends. It doesn't matter. I'll draft 5 tight ends for all I care. If that's the type of build that, if I'm strong at every other position and I get into the later rounds and I'm like, all right, I'm weak at tight end and I don't know which one of these guys are going to hit. And I'm in that, 15, rankings of 15th or higher. And there's 2 or 3 guys that I like, I'll take them bang, 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 and then just hope one emerges earlier. I did that last year with Dalton Schultz. He was on a couple of, my late teams in those last couple rounds. And hey, after the first, 2 weeks, I knew I had a tight end that I could be my starting tight end. So you never know. You just got to I like the Chargers D. So there's certain weeks early on that I'll throw them out there and and I'll play the matchups.
Question from Dave Gladstone. Was Deonta Foreman a block move, or do you prefer him over a few running backs who were still available?
Let's see here.
I would say I doubt it was a block move from Chris. But if we were in the New York Super, you might do a little block move.
Main event season, maybe.
Main event, no.
Yeah, main event season, maybe. I'm not I'm now, shout out to Mike Sander, the king of blocking in
Big time.
these drafts.
And the king of
I'm
using
no
the whole
Sander.
clock, right, Chris?
What'd you say?
The king of using the entire clock.
Oh, the clock bleeder. That's
Yeah.
it. I think we might have to. I'm pretty. I gave Mike Edelman his nickname that we all call him now, Uno, back in the day, but we might have to give that to Sander.
60. Michael be 60. He uses the full 60.
The full 60 or the clock bleeder. We might have to give that one to him. But no, it wasn't a at all. It was not a block at all. It was more of you get into these rounds of the drafts and you're looking to build your running back room with high upside, backup running backs on certain teams. And hey, listen, we've seen McCaffrey go down 2-3 times, 2-3 years in a row here. So Foreman is another running back I like taking on a lot of my drafts and online championship season. Who knows? Maybe McCaffrey goes down again. And you got yourself a solid RB2 in Foreman. So, yeah.
I have a lot of Foreman as well.
Yeah. Let me just go back to something real quick that Chris was talking about. He'll take 4 tight ends late if that's what his needs are. And I think a lot of people just don't really quite understand that strategy as much. If you're feeling that bad about your tight ends, you're probably feeling pretty good about your wide receivers and running backs, right? Because you've been prioritizing them. And, so it just doesn't make sense to sit there and grab, like an 8th wide receiver or a 7th running back or something like that when you really still have a need at tight end, because let's say you get down into that range and, you feel like, okay, well, there's, a few guys, I think they have a 25% chance of, turning into a decent tight end. If you grab only one of them, you only got a 25% chance. You grab 2 of them, you still only got a 50% chance. You grab 3 of them, now you're at a 75% chance. You grab 4 of them, there's a much better chance you've got, you're going to get a good tight end out of it. And the thing is,
Yeah, I'll say, Chris, you also have maybe the position gets devalued in FFWC and NFFC drafting, where I know Dan's had a lot of success occasionally starting 2 tight ends. Do you find that where the position gets devalued? Do you find guys late and maybe you get some flex weeks out of that tight end too?
Yeah, absolutely. Tight end is always the position I'll always wait on the most. I'm never going to be the Kelsey guy. I don't think I've ever even owned Travis Kelsey. That might be wrong because he's been a stud, but I don't like the build off of the early tight end. So I'm always, and I've had success through the years of hitting on those mid-range tight ends, in those 8th through 13th round ranges. And I'll always draft 2, especially if I don't have that top 7 round tight end, which I normally don't. So I'm always going to come with 2, if not 3. And, just to go back on the point, a lot of people, listening at home, these are 20 round drafts. And I don't know if people get, tripped up with that sometimes because they'll look and they'll say, oh my God, he drafted 3 tight ends. But, the board is shrinking, like I said. And whereas, my 17th, 18th and 19th rounds in early mid-July was the George Pickens and the Wan'Dale Robinsons and guys I could put like that. Well, those guys are no longer 18th rounders. They're 14th rounders, 13th rounders. So those sleeper picks at receiver and running back, the Zamir Whites that I was taking on all my teams in the 18th, 19th round, those guys aren't options for me anymore. So when I come into a draft and I feel like I have, like Dan said, 5 solid wide receivers, home run hitters, big time studs, 5-6 guys, 3 solid running backs, a big time quarterback. And I get to that 16th, 17th, 18th round, and my starting tight end is a Irv Smith in the 12th, whatever. Well, I'm going to come back and look and say, oh, you know what? Evan Ingram and David Njoku, let me put these guys. They have a shot to revive their careers here, and be them, and contribute and be starting tight ends. We see it every year where there's guys that are in the 15, 20 round at tight end. 2 or 3 of these guys show up out of nowhere and hit. And those are 2 names right there. And there's others. Believe me, I could go through it, but we won't. guys like that. So yeah, early in the season, I don't have let me see for the first 2-3 weeks if these guys are focal points in their, offenses. If they have solid roles, maybe they're the number 2 option in the pass game. I mean, we could see that with an Evan Ingram or David Njoku. And if one of them does that, well, now, hey, I was smart to in the 18th and 19th round come back with my second and third tight end with those guys. Let it play out for the first 2 weeks and let me develop my tight end room into a starter.
And you guys,
that was gold right there. That's exactly it. That is 100% correct. And it's so much cheaper to have that tight end blow up when he's on your roster than to try to go chasing him in free agency.
That's it. Right. No, I was going to say we avoid that first waiver wire run to make up for it at a one-off position, and you avoid having to use money in that important week 1 where you're going to have a chance at getting Elijah Mitchell. Than you would having to go spend it on a one-off guy. So yeah, I love the take on that. We've hit an hour 40. Chris has been super generous with his time, as always. I have about 50 guys I wanted to ask you about tonight. We're not going to get to all of them, but I'll say in a short answer, we'll talk about Chris being a New York guy. Are we back to Saquon season in New York?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
Right?
Yeah, we are. Many reasons to love to be back on Saquon again this year. I don't know if people realize the way they rebuilt this offensive line and invested in it. And it's just different than it has been the last couple of years, bringing in guys. And then Evan Neal, another top pick. So the O-line is rebuilt. It's better than it's been for, as a Giants fan, a long time. The coaching upgrade, the fact that they want to get him the ball in the pass game, the fact that he's got no competition in the backfield, it adds up. It adds up. And most importantly, after all that, if that wasn't enough to sell you, it's the ever popular second year off of the major injury, which is what I won't touch running backs the first year off of the ACL tear. I'll always fade that. Second year, we're back in business. So it's adding up to that for sure.
Yeah, he might sneak in that first round by the time September comes around. You might be having to use about 110, 109 on him. It's super exciting. It's better for fantasy football in general when we have a healthy Saquon Barkley. And I know as a guy who lives in New York as well, it's great for just the entire metropolitan area to have him playing on Sundays. Other Giant
that back end. I'm sorry, dude. I just want to say that back end of that first is just a really nice place to find some running backs. That top 16 overall, one of my favorite things right now for the last month and a half has been if any of those big 6 wide receivers are on the board at the end of that first, hit that, and you just know you're falling into a solid RB1 on the flip side in round 2 that you don't have to force the running back in the first round. You're getting your hands on the Aaron Joneses, the Swifts, the Mixons. Dalvin falls sometimes the back end of the first. All these guys are just sitting there where it's a comfortable spot right now for the last month and a half at the back end of the first in the second round to get yourself your bell cow and then build off of that however way you want to go. When you got the big top 6 wide receiver, the Diggs, Diggs, Lamb, and Devontae. So you get your hands on one of those, and then you go from there.
Dan, you were super stoked to get Saquon last night.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it was. No, I gotta say, this is FFPC, so it was tight end premium, and we had a healthy debate on it was either him or Pitts. We did go Saquon. Theo, what was your thought? If this had been a solo Theo draft, would you have taken Saquon or Pitts there?
My love of Pitts runs deep, but we say that we find the truth when we're on the clock, and most of the times I've gone Saquon over him in football guys type drafts as well. Saquon, like what Chris said, where I could get a Saquon or a DeAndre Swift in the second round, I've loved my builds. I'm buying into it. I'm buying into Saquon as a receiver. and we've talked about it on the show before, where we like a couple of these later tight ends. I think I can make up for it. I feel like with Saquon, you might be passing up on an 85 reception season, something like that, and you're not going to be able to make up for it. Even if Breece Hall exceeds expectations or one of those guys really hits, it's going to be hard to reach that ceiling that Saquon's capable of as a former 101. And Chris, real quick, Kadarius Toney, a guy that I've taken a bunch of times lately. Dan and I took him last night. I'm super bullish. Where are you at on Kadarius? Is he a breakout guy for you this year?
Kadarius Toney has been mispriced on the board for the last month and a half, in my opinion. The fact I was getting him in every draft in the 80s and laughing every single time. I just think that he's that guy that once camp goes through, I think he establishes himself as the number one receiver, the go-to guy in New York's passing offense. And if this offense takes that next step, people are going to be clamoring to get their hands on him come main event season. And the discount days are probably over on him. He's trending up. And there's that pocket after those middle round receivers in the 50s and early 60s. You get to that next wave of wide receivers. And let's throw in your boy Treylon Burks there. I think those are going to be the two sexiest names at wide receiver of those guys, where we talked about how Breece Hall, in my opinion, could move up into the top 30 in a month from now. I think Burks and Toney can find themselves up into the 70s and 60s, and who knows, infinity and beyond. But who knows? Yeah. But those two guys will be the hot names at the wide receiver position.
Dan and I drafted those guys in back-to-back rounds last night, so we're feeling extremely sexy.
Toney and Burks?
Yeah.
Toney and Burks?
Yeah.
Was that as your 4 and 5, or as how?
No, it was our wide receiver 3 and 4, but we had
FFPC. Yeah, okay.
We used it. We got Kittle, so we felt strong at tight end. But it's funny because Toney, we always see a wide receiver riser. It's like the ADP in the first and second round doesn't really move a whole lot, but we see a wide receiver riser every year. Last year it was Jerry Jeudy, where you would take him in the beginning of August. You're like, hey, I love getting him in the 6th round. And then by the time drafts, the big main events happening in the summer, Dan and I took Jerry Jeudy at like wide receiver 23, 22, one FFPC main. Chris, I know you took Jeudy super early in a couple of New York drafts. It kind of reminds me of that, where Toney could really fly up. So I'm enjoying the discount now. And Burks is super interesting as well. We hit a $147. There's one question we've had every single guest answer since rookie draft season ended. Besides the big three, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Cooper Kupp, who is the wide receiver you see finishing as wide receiver 1 overall? And you can give 2 guys if you prefer.
I'll give a top guy, and I'll give a middle of the road guy that if everything works out perfect, not to just give the cop out answer. I know.
No, that's a good one.
The easy answer is Devontae and Diggs and those the guys that are right before. So the answer for that one would be, in my opinion, Lamb. Lamb, I could see having a wide receiver 1 season. I just think he's going to get absolutely peppered with targets in Dallas. So that would be that one. And then the middle of the road guy that if everything works out perfectly, Cortland Sutton. Just because of this Tim Patrick news, and I could see him and Russ making making magic happen this year, and him being, another guy, a couple years off of that injury now, 2nd year off the injury. And he could be that alpha, I don't want to say DK Metcalf because that's the easy way. I'm just saying that outside big receiver that could catch 16 to 18 touchdowns, 85, 90 catches, and make a run at that wide receiver 1 position.
Glenn Lowy gave the same answer.
Did he?
He gave Cortland Sutton his.
Did he? My boy Glenn, he's a smart man. He's a smart man. He's a great player and a smart man.
There's a lot of sharp people right there.
Yeah. How much you look? You're cutting out here. I'm sorry. How much are you looking forward to that New York Super, Theo?
Tomorrow.
Oh, sorry. Say that again.
Theo, you're cutting out.
I'm big time looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just lost connection. I was saying Dan is. Oh, that's me cutting out.
Yeah, that's you.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
No.
Am I back now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry about
I
that.
hear you.
I thought it was somebody else frozen. Okay, cool. So we're hit at $150. This was awesome tonight. I think we could have talked for about 2 more hours. But
Easily.
we're gonna let Chris go. Chris, let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me over at The Athletic. My articles will be starting in a week or 2. So my weekly column and weekly podcast will be there at The Athletic. And you'll be seeing me in the draft room on a nightly basis. And that's it. Next week, also, I want to plug this. I'll be doing the Nffc show with Greg Ambrosius. That's next week as his high stakes guest to just talk about my career in the Nffc and high stakes. And it's a great show. I mean, everybody's got such a different avenue in this field. And let me, I don't want to, kiss your asses here. I love you guys, but this show is so unbelievable for the high stakes community. What you guys have turned this into. Okay, the fact that you guys are pumping out weekly shows, multiple weekly shows with the top players in the game, the top analysts in the game, the brightest minds. I hope I did my part, to add to it tonight. But you guys are just killing it. It's a unique show, and there's so much talent out there in this fantasy industry. You guys are right at the top of the list. So props to you guys. We all love the show. All of us high stakes players. We all talk about it. And but yeah, Greg has a nice thing going at the Nffc with his show every week, bringing on a guest and just talking about a career. It's not breaking down players. We're not talking the draft board this year or anything. It's just getting to know each player that we've known on Twitter or through the industry, just getting to know their fantasy career. And I'll be doing that this week, so look out for that.
Nice.
Yeah. No, we really appreciate that. And I think we try to amplify the voice of the best players in the country on the podcast, and I think that it's been helpful to everybody. So it's you've been on a number of times. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate all of our high stakes guests. And Dan and I plan on taking down some big ones this year ourselves. So it all goes full circle. Dan, you're going to be drafting on the road tomorrow night in the Draft Sharks Invitational.
Yep, definitely. It'll be a fun one. I'm driving from Minnesota to Washington, D.C. tomorrow. So towards the end of that drive, it'll help keep me awake. Fortunately, I have my daughter driving with me, so she'll be taking the wheel during the draft. So I don't have to actually try to draft and drive, but it'll still be interesting. So
Dan, I
don't
hope
draft and drive, anybody. Don't draft and drive.
No, don't draft and dive. And Dan, I hope your internet connection is better than Theo's and doesn't cut out during the draft.
There you go, guys.
The nice thing is I'm sitting at the 11 hole, so as it starts coming to me, I can put in a quick little cue every time, and my picks are done in just a brief little instant. So as long as I don't lose internet connection for too long, I'll be all right.
There you go.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks to Dan and Chris. This was an awesome show. The chat was live, and we'll be back on looking like Friday for a Ballin' episode where we're going to be best ball drafting, and then we have Andrew Cooper on Monday, which should be an awesome tight end show. So have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you soon.